Hello, and welcome back to a Kaizen Mind My Approach series. Now, you'll notice a tiny bit more bling and a bit more glam. There's a reason for that, and I'll explain it in a moment. So, I'm Linda Heffernan, a Kaizen Mind behavioral scientist specializing in executive leadership coaching and cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy and therapy for executives. So today I want to talk to you about a character a lot of my clients meet in our sessions. I call her my Jolene. Most people know her by a different name, Imposter syndrome. But I want to show you why that name is actually part of the problem. And I want to use a well-known song to explain what I mean. This, though, is serious. It's informed by my evidence-based training in psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, neuroscience, and coaching. So there's no woo-woo here, folks. Before I go any further, I want to pause on something personal. I finished writing this script last night, just several hours before Dolly Parton passed away. And I, like many of you, I'm sure, have been a huge fan of hers for a very long time. So I wanted to take a moment to say thank you to you, Dolly, properly before I use Jolene, one of your eponymous songs, to actually teach. This one means something particular to me. Dolly is a beloved person. And many of you know I love books. I give my clients regular recommendations for books, and I run a YouTube book club, a Kaizen Mind book club, just for book recommendations. So Dolly's imagination library and everything it's done to put more than 200 million free books into children's hands has always meant a great deal to me personally. And on a different note, my family has had our own experience of childhood cancer. So Dolly's quiet, discreet, consistent support for children's hospitals and pediatric cancer research isn't an abstract good deed to me. It's the support that reaches families in some of the hardest moments of their lives. And I've had a small window into what that means. So beyond being a phenomenal artist, a phenomenal feminist, and a phenomenal human being, I've always felt a personal connection to Dolly for those reasons. So it felt right that I say that properly before I use Jolene in this video. I'm sure you've all heard of Dolly Parton's song, Jolene. Miley Cyrus does a fantastic version too. So it's about a woman begging another woman, please don't take my man, okay? And here's what most people don't know. Jolene wasn't one person. Dolly has explained consistently over decades that she merged two real memories into one single character. There was a real bank teller, a little too attentive bank teller to her husband, Carl. This is what Dolly felt. And that part was real. That was a genuine flicker of insecurity based on a genuine event. Some people have said it wasn't true. It was made up by the record company. I don't know. But the name, the flaming locks of auburn hair from the song, the whole vivid rival called Jolene, that came from somewhere else entirely. It was actually an 8-year-old fan who asked Dolly for an autograph night one night and said to her, my name is Jolene, and she had auburn hair. So Dolly took one small real event and built an entire character on top of it, probably to save the bank teller's blushes, if that part is true. And that's exactly what happens from my perspective with the imposter within. And it's why I gave mine a name, and I call my internal imposter Jolene. I want to be precise here because most of the conversation about the imposter, in my opinion, only gets it half right. Jolene isn't pure fiction. She's not something your mind invested from nothing or invented from nothing, sorry. There is usually a little kernel of something real behind her, a piece of feedback, a moment you didn't perform the way you wanted to, a genuine gap in your knowledge or experience. That kernel is legitimate and it deserves attention. But then, the same way Dolly took one real bank teller and built a fully formed rival around her, your mind takes that one real kernel and constructs a whole character on top of it, a voice, a running commentary, a you don't belong here that follows you into rooms you've absolutely earned the right to be in. So I call my inner imposter Jolene, not to dismiss her, but because naming her lets me see her as separate from me. She's a character that my mind has constructed, partly out of something true. So my job isn't to prove she's completely wrong. My job is to work out which part of what she's saying is the real bank teller and which part is the story I've added on top. And further to that, we actually don't even know if the bank teller really was interested in Carl in the first place. So all of it could be slight, not knowing ambiguity. Now, there's something important here that I want to push back against. It's popular language. And many people who come from a therapeutic background, as well like me, have noticed in coaching circles this constant use of the term imposter syndrome. And I, like many colleagues, think it's actually working against people. Most people call the experience imposter syndrome, and I began challenging that years ago. With my clients, I encourage them to get curious about the language they're using there. Language is powerful. I'm cognitive behavioral in my approach. And self-talk can frame identity, especially when that self-talk is within the amygdala, okay? And I want to walk you through why I make that curiosity challenge, because one word swaps to me that I swap makes a real difference to how I think your brain will process it, okay? So a syndrome. Clinically, it describes something organic, a cluster of signs and symptoms pointing to an underlying condition in the body. It's something you have, not something you're doing. Syndromes are generally understood as fixed, congenital, in the sense that they're baked into your biology or your neurology. You don't reframe your way out of a syndrome. You manage it, but the underlying architecture doesn't move. Now you might say, Linda, we're just being pedantic here. But listen to my reframe in a different way. A mindset is something entirely different to a syndrome. A mindset is a pattern of thought. It is learned, it is practiced, and it is reinforced over time. And to quote Susan Goldworthy, the mind shift can make all of the difference in your thinking and your behavior. Because the mindset was learned, it can be unlearned. And this is the beauty of neuroplasticity. There is movement built into the definition itself. It's not, this is what I have. It's, this is what I'm currently practicing. And listen to that difference. Anything you're currently practicing, you can eventually practice differently. So when you call this experience a syndrome, even without meaning to, you're telling your brain, which has associated connections with the concept of syndrome. You're telling it this is permanent, this is medical, this is just how I'm wired. That framing removes your agency before you've even started any work to reframe or make changes that you want to make. When you call it a mindset, the imposter mindset, you're telling your brain something else entirely. This is a pattern I built, which means it's a pattern I can rebuild. And there's some beautiful neuroscience there, neuroplasticity, neural pathways, another video maybe. Same racing heart before you speak up in a meeting, the imposter mindset. Same voice telling you, they're going to find out. But one word locks the door. The other word hands you the key. So let me give you an example. Priya, I think we've met her in another video. I've used that name. It's not her real name. Is a newly promoted finance director who came to me for coaching, and that was the real function. She'd been in the role 3 months, slight difference. I'm changing things ever so slightly for anonymity. And she told me in our first session, I think I have imposter syndrome. I've read all about it. I know what it is. I just don't know how to fix it. And I've been trying to talk myself, positive psychology and all sorts of twat-twat-toing and thick-talking. So that language mattered, the language of I have it and fix it. Both words that treat this as a fixed condition sitting inside her, and furthermore, something broken that needed repair. So we started by naming her version of Jolene. Priya had a very specific line. You only got this because they needed a woman on the board. So that was her character, and she named the character. She gave the character a name. It was a character that was also vivid, specific, and persistent. So we did the work of exploring where the real bank teller ended and the story began. So what's the accuracy and what is the truth the amygdala is telling you, which is probably a lie. I asked her permission first, okay? I asked, would it be okay if we sat with that belief for a moment? And that's where I go in when most people bring in the imposter. Then we worked with some really good open questions, I think, not leading her anywhere, just making space for her own awareness to surface. And I asked her, what makes you believe that? And there followed quite a silence. And eventually she came with, actually, someone congratulated me when the promotion was announced. And they said, about time they got some diversity on that board. Not only was Priya a woman, Priya also happened to be a woman of color. I don't think they meant anything by it. That's what she was sure. I don't think they meant to be unpleasant, but I've been hearing it on a loop ever since. And I paused, and then I asked, so what's the difference for you between what actually happened in that moment and what you've made it mean since? It's a big question, and rightly, it led to a long pause. The comment happened, that's fact. But you only got this because they need a woman on the board. That's not what he said. He didn't say a woman and a woman of color. That's what I turned it into. Light bulb. Now, I didn't tell Priya which part was the bank teller and which part was Jolene. She worked that out herself in her own words, once she had the concept and once she had the space to look for it. Later on, then, in the same coaching conversation, she named the other piece too, and actually it came unprompted, as it often does in this approach. She said, I am genuinely behind some of my peers on the financial modeling side. I'm going to call it financial modeling. It was something else, but for anonymity, we're calling it that. And she said, that part's real. But I had folded that into the same story as the comment, like they were both proof of the same thing, almost like a version of a confirmation bias. Then we did the language shift. Instead of, do I have imposter syndrome, which is what she came in asking and wondering about herself and kind of confirming to herself too, Priya practiced asking, what mindset am I currently practicing? What mindset am I currently practicing? That question led somewhere completely different. It wasn't what's wrong with me anymore. It was more, okay, lady, what have I been rehearsing and what could I rehearse instead? And we had some silence in that moment. So I asked Priya to try something very specific, and I'm going to encourage you now to try it too if you wish to. The next time Jolene, or whatever you decide to name your imposter, naming is helpful. The next time Jolene shows up, ask yourself, what message, what language am I rehearsing here? And what could I rehearse instead? Notice what happens in your body the moment you shift from I have this thing to I'm currently practicing this thing. Notice maybe the shoulders, the stomach. Notice the breath. And that's your assessment step. Not judging whether the reframe worked, but simply noticing if anything shifts. So Priya's answer about 3 weeks later, I think, was that the tightness across her chest before board meetings had already changed. We'd also done some work on breath resetting. So it wasn't gone completely, but it was noticeably less. And she told me, you know, I'm joking with myself here. It's not a diagnosis anymore. It feels like a habit that I'm in the middle of changing. Bingo. That's the joy of curiosity work. So there's a difference between a syndrome and a mindset, felt in the body, not just understood in theory. And that's an important difference. The mind-body connection is symbiotic. It's all in one. I don't feel a separation, but I want to go a little deeper here. But because this connects to something at the heart of both my coaching and my therapeutic work. Jolene isn't just a nice metaphor, my friends. She's rooted in something real happening in your brain. Your behavior and your somatic responses are driven by one of two systems, and you will often hear me speak about them. The amygdala is your threat detection system. It is fast, automatic, no conscious choice involved. Fight and flight. Okay, maybe a tiny bit of freeze. It's constantly scanning for anything that might signal danger. Appraise, appraise, appraise. And it fires before your slower, more deliberate prefrontal cortex has even caught up. That's reaction. Now, the prefrontal cortex is your thinking brain. It's slower, deliberate, conscious. It evaluates, considers, chooses, logic, rationale, reasoning, decision-making. Hopefully good decision-making. Well, that's a response. So amygdala react, prefrontal response. When Jolene shows up, that flush of you don't belong here, that tightening in your chest before Priya speaks, That's very often your amygdala reacting to something it has flagged as a threat to your safety or your status. It's not trying to sabotage you, it's doing its job with limited information and a rather blunt instrument. So here's where I differ from a lot of the advice out there. Most people are told to challenge the imposter, argue with her, push her away, drown her out with affirmations. I need a moment. I don't work like that. When you try to fight or suppress a genuine amygdala reaction, you tend to get more of it, not less. So instead, I encourage something different. Listen to her. Listen to your imposter. Thank her or him or they or whatever. Connect with what they're actually trying to tell you. Now, that doesn't mean believing everything Jolene says at face value. Remember, she's built partly on a real kernel of information and partly on an exaggerated story, just like the song. It means treating her as information rather than as an enemy. Hi, Jolene. I hear you. Thank you. Thank you for flagging this. Thank you for trying to tell me something. What exactly are you responding to here or reacting to here? Now, if you've watched my video on the A game, this will sound familiar because this is exactly what the aware and acknowledge stages are built for. Aware is where you notice Jolene has shown up through your internal language, your emotional response, your somatic signals. That is your amygdala reacting in real time through your body. So, acknowledge is where the real work happens. When you move from reaction to response, a fixed mindset acknowledgement pushes her away, judges her, and fixed mindset, that will make sense if you've watched my growth mindset video. So the fixed mindset pushes her away, judges her, or tries to power through. I shouldn't feel this way. I need to silence this. Even judgment. Why are you doing this to yourself again? Whereas a growth mindset acknowledgement engages the prefrontal cortex instead. Thank you for the signal. What actually are you trying to tell me? Can I just get curious and check that that's accurate in the moment? Or is the amygdala lying to me? And that's the listen. It's the listen, thank, connect approach in practice. You're not arguing with your amygdala, and you're not letting it run the show unchecked either. You're partnering it with it. It's self-coaching. You're taking the raw signal that it sends and using your prefrontal cortex to work out what's real and what's the story that's not true, before you decide what you want to do next. So to me, that's the difference between a syndrome and a mindset, felt in the body, not just understood in theory. Right, Linda, let's recap. That's a lot. So essentially, your imposter isn't pure fiction, and she isn't the whole truth either. There's usually a real kernel underneath her, and a character your mind has built on top of that kernel. Calling this a syndrome tells your brain the situation is fixed. Calling it a mindset tells your brain it's a pattern, which means it's a pattern you can practice differently. The next time she shows up, please don't try to silence her or shame her. Don't try to fight her either, okay? Get precise and get curious with her instead. Find the one real thing that she's standing on. What is the one accuracy? And then ask yourself, is the rest of this really a syndrome? Or is it a mindset that I have been practicing? rehearsing, and now I'm ready to practice and rehearse in a different way. So this is really the beginning of a relationship, a partnership with Jolene, not a conflict. In my next video, I want to go deeper into what it actually looks like to get to know her properly, to partner with her rather than push her away. Because the imposter you're trying to silence usually just gets louder, and I've discussed why in a different video. When you try to push away, the amygdala gets louder. So, folks, my friends, if this reframe resonates with you, if you recognize Jolene in your own thinking and you'd like support working through it, please connect with me and definitely listen to the next video, like and subscribe, everything. This is the kind of work I do every day with leaders, executives, humans who want to perform at their very best without carrying a story about themselves that was never fully true to begin with. Thank you for watching, and as always, look after yourselves.